What is up, party people? It's Dan, your basement guitar superstar. Today we're going to do something a little bit different on the channel. Um, if you're like me at all, which I know some of you are because you're guitarists, and you probably try and get as much gear as possible if you're a gearhead, also like me. I've had a lot of frustration around the used guitar market recently. And I wanted to talk about that with you because there's some things I've noticed that are going on that the videos I've seen aren't, some of it's being talked about and others really isn't. Other stuff really isn't. So I wanted to talk about those things, why the used guitar market is so frustrating right now for people that are actual musicians, and what we can do about it as a collective, and how long I think it's going to last, etc., etc. There are a number of contributing factors to that. But first of all, thank you so much for watching. I have put out 11 videos so far. They've all been very well received. Those of you that have liked and subscribed and commented, I really appreciate it. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy giving this info and doing pedal previews for you guys, and you've been hugely supportive, and I really appreciate it. And as always, if you find this content valuable, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button and hit the little bell symbol for me too, so you know when I have other content coming up. So let's talk about the used market. There are a lot of different things going on right now. Obviously, the overhanging issue, the elephant in the room, if you will, is the pandemic. So COVID-19 has been interesting. I won't say good, I won't say bad. It's been interesting. For the guitar companies, it has not been a good thing because production for several months was pretty much halted, where everybody was on lockdown and stay-at-home orders were in place. And so big retailers like Sweetwater and Musician's Friend and Guitar Center, West Music, different places like that, were experiencing a lack of new gear for people to buy. So what happened was people started buying up used gear in droves like we've never seen before. And I don't have any of the statistics on it. I just know it's happening, and I know what that's causing. So when I look at buying a piece of gear, there are a couple places I look. I look on Craigslist, I look on Facebook, I look on Reverb, and I'm going to tell you, I actually will never buy anything on Reverb again unless I have no other choice, and I'll tell you why later in the video. There are some trends that I've noticed, and I'm in Iowa in the USA. It's kind of the middle northern part of the country, and last year about this same time, obviously before the pandemic hit, right before Christmas, there was a lot of used gear being listed and a lot of very, very, what I would consider reasonable prices. So I could get stuff literally half or 3/4 of what it was selling for used at Guitar Center or musicaround.com or any of the various places, High Bid, or any of the various places where you can get used gear at. This was a good thing for me because it allowed me to acquire some pieces that I otherwise would not have in my collection, and such as I acquired a Fender Player Series Marauder that I did not have before. They only made those for 1 year, obviously based on a prototype that Fender did back in the 60s or 70s. There's a really good video about that, by the way. I know this is kind of an offshoot topic. I will post a link to that in the description about the history of the Fender Marauder. It's super interesting. So you guys can go watch that if you're interested. Anyway, stuff like that I was able to acquire for what I would actually consider a reasonable price. Now, I am not a cheapskate by any means. I'm willing to pay what gear is worth if it's a piece I really want. Now, if it's something that I just want to try that I've never heard before, or I don't like the reviews online, so I want to try it and hear it through my amp, either here or at my house. Here I have a Trainer YCV40 valve amp. At my home I have a Orange TR35 valve amp, and I like to try out new stuff and see how it sounds on both amps, because obviously the trainers are more like a bluesy, clean type sound, whereas Orange is more like distortion driven and stuff like that. You guys get the idea. Anyway, I like to try new gear, and this year it's been very, very tough to do that. I feel that I get better value actually buying new from a manufacturer. And the reason I say that, let me give you an example. So, Facebook Marketplace recently, those of you that know me and watch the channel know that I am a big connoisseur of Traynor amps. That's Traynor. They're made in Canada, manufactured by Yorkville Corporation. Now, they used to be independently made by a guy with the last name Traynor, who's super interesting. They have a documentary about him you can go watch if you have time. They are great amps. They sound amazing. I want as many Traynor amps as I could possibly have because they all sound awesome and they all have their own distinct, unique sound. So there's a listing with a Traynor ReverbMate 40, which is a 40-watt amp that they made, I want to say 10 to 12 years ago. They sound really good. I would like one. Usually on the used market through Guitar Center and places such as that, they go for $125 to $150, right? So this listing was listing a Traynor amp like that, and then a Cort guitar. I want to say it was an M28 or some model, or Z something. Anyway, it was a Traynor guitar from the early to mid 2000s, back when or not Traynor guitar, a Cort guitar. Sorry, from back before Cort really kind of figured themselves out. Now they make fantastic guitars. I used to not be a huge fan of stuff they made. We got a lot of it in at the music store I worked at here in town for a brief period. And it was, your token beginner guitars that had, sharp frets on them. They weren't super playable. They didn't stay in tune very well, etc. Now Cort has figured their thing out and they make great instruments. Right, but this is not one of those. This is one of those early ones that had some quality control issues with it, and he's asking $400 for the pair. Now, me being a musician, I am not going to pay $400 for that. Right, the guitar I can maybe get $75 out of because I have no interest in the guitar whatsoever. Now the amp, I want just to have the amp. So that one I'm willing to give them $135, $140 for. So pretty close to what they're going for used. Now, I get a hold of them and I say, hey, I'm a big fan of Traynor amps. Would you be willing to separate this out? These normally go for $150 top end, right? If they're in great shape. It looks like yours is a little beat up. You said you're having some issues with the pots in the description. How about I give you $100 for it? And he comes back, he's like, well, I don't really want to separate them, but if you want it that bad, you'll give me $200. And it's like, look, dude, I'm not trying to lowball you. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I'm a musician. I play Traynor stuff. I know what it's worth. I'm willing to pay what they go for used, but I'm not willing to overpay or get ripped off for it. So 3 weeks go by. The listing just happens to still be up. Surprise, surprise. Right? I offer the guy $300. I said, tell you what, I'll take a loss on the guitar. I want that amp. Right? I'll give you $300 for both. Haven't heard anything. That was about a week ago when I made him that offer. So I doubt I'll hear anything. If I do, he'll probably be like, nope. Price is firm. So is what it is. Occasionally I see Traynor stuff on here that I want. I really want a Dynagain 60 also, or DG 65 or whatever the model is. There was a guy on here, I would have got it for reasonable, but the actual box for the amp was all messed up and I would have had to reglue it. Anyway, not a big deal. So you get people like that overvalue their stuff. And to me, that is a combination of a bunch of different things. So, disclaimer with this, Reverb is a fine site. I think it's a good place for people to be able to sell their gear used and not get ripped off while selling it used. At the same time, it's a bad thing, though, because it allows people to grossly overinflate the prices on stuff. So let me give an example here. I used to own a Fender Tornado. I own two Squier Tornados now, the Paranormal series, this guy right here. So these to me sound very, very close to their Fender predecessors, which were only made from 98 to 2003. Go ahead and hang this back up here on the hook. Great guitars. I love the way they sound. They were supposed to be Fender's kind of alternative to the Les Paul and an offset body shape. Great guitars, right? They have a cult following. Now, I bought my Tornado back in 2007 when I worked at this store here in town called Music Around. And I got mine for $275 with a hard shell case. Now, the cheapest I have seen those go for, and this is the Tornado GT, the very last version of it they made that isn't quite as good, in my opinion, as the initial Tornadoes that came out in 1998 when they first started making them. I have seen the GTs go for mid 500s to around $750. The model like I had, which was the Made in Mexico series, was a quality instrument. That was when the Mexico factory was really starting to figure things out and come into their own and make some good gear. And it started with that year. And I have to do some research. I'm not sure what else came out that year. But anyway, so Tornadoes have a cult following. Some people love them. You either love them or you hate them, right? I love them. I think they sound fantastic, hence why I bought both the Squiers, because they sound pretty darn close. I just sold my Tornado because somebody made me an offer on it that was double what I paid for it initially. So stuff like that is worth the money. But if you have just a generic Les Paul Studio from, let's say, 2004, that they sold new for $750, right? You'll see guys that have it with a case that'll list it as very rare, right? Or ultra rare, or only made a certain number of these, and it's like a generic mahogany color that's not very desirable, that's frankly kind of ugly looking, and they're asking $2,300 for it. And there are some people that'll take that bait. And I'm not harping on anybody. Gear is worth what somebody is willing to pay for it. But scam artists like that are also inflating the prices on things terribly right now. So let's say you have somebody, some 23-year-old, and I'm not harping on millennials, but let's just give an example. 23 to 25-year-old dude, grandpa dies, dad has no interest in being a musician, grandpa leaves him a bunch of guitars, right? His only research he does is he goes on Reverb and looks at all these inflated listings and goes on and says, hey, I can make a huge amount of money on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. Goes on, lists let's say it's a Epiphone Les Paul, Black Beauty or something, right? I think the most I've seen those go for, the Epiphone version of it, $1,200 used. And that was something that was immaculate. I think it was a custom shop maybe. It was years ago, but anyway, it's neither here nor there. So he sees all these inflated prices on there and decides to list it. Well, $1,700. This is a super rare guitar. It's a Black Beauty, which is highly desirable. Super rare. And he's asking $1,700 for it. Now, and by the way, price is firm, right? So people like that are also making the used market very frustrating. People that are not musicians don't understand the level of knowledge you need to have in order to be selling something for a fair price. Now, I am not saying that I disagree with people trying to make money on things. I absolutely agree with that 100%. I believe in capitalism. However, I do not believe in ripping people off, blatantly ripping people off. And I feel like there are a lot of sellers right now that are doing that. The other thing to me that's very frustrating, and I'll use Facebook Marketplace as an example, there's been a lot of gear listed around here recently, and the way my job works, I own my own business. I only get paid from the corporation I work for once a month. So right now there is a trainer. I keep using trainer because I love them. There's a trainer. I think it's a YGL 3 head and cab combo for like $800. And normally the head cab combo from the 70s like that actually work go for 12 to 1500. So I'm like, man, I want this, but I don't have enough money to go get it, right? Another example I'll give you, some lady on Facebook Marketplace, obviously I'm not going to give out names, but there are some local flippers here, and this goes back to what I was saying on Reverb, about Reverb and their inflated prices, and I'll tie Guitar Center into that as well. And I'm not harping on Guitar Center, the one here is awesome. Great people that run it and all of that, but Guitar Center I think is contributing to that. But let's go back anywhere. There's another listing on Facebook. It's a lady that's selling a Squier Strat. It's an Affinity. It's like this beautiful kind of sunburst color with a red torch shell pickguard. Just looks immaculate. She's only selling it for $35. Now, I want to flip that piece of gear just because I don't need another Strat. I already have a Squier one, and that's such a good deal that I can't pass it. I can't help but not turn it around, right? Now, it turns out that I didn't see that listing till about half an hour after she listed it, because I don't sit there and click on my computer all day. And she ended up selling it. I made her an offer. I said, look, you're selling this way too low. I'll give you $55 for it. She listed it at $35. And she's like, well, it already sold. The guy came and picked it up 10 minutes ago. And it's like, okay. So that's the other thing that this pandemic has done is a lot of people are out of jobs or they're working from home and can easily leave and go procure stuff. I have my own office. I have to be here to answer phones. I have that flexibility because I own the business, but I can't always, like, I'll have an appointment that I can't leave and go procure a piece of gear that I want. So there's a lot of that going on. There's also people, members of the general public, that maybe buy something for their kids that the kid plays for a month and then loses interest in because they bought them, a cheap, crappy guitar that doesn't stay in tune, that doesn't play very well, that they get frustrated. They think it's them and not the piece of gear. And I'll do another video on that whole element later because that was a big thing at Music Round with us when we sold guitars to people. But I won't go into that now. So you have these parents that are pissed off that they're disappointed that their kid didn't play. They paid $250 for a package deal from whatever local guitar store is doing the Squier amp cables guitar combo with a gig bag or whatever, and they think, well, I should be able to get back what I paid for this. Obviously with this lady it wasn't the case. She sold it for $35. Turns out the guy that bought it is giving it to his kid for Christmas, which I'm totally cool with, right? However, there are a few flippers in the area. Two of them I really like. One of them's my buddy. He's actually a colleague with the same company I work for. Great guy. Doesn't try and rip people off. Another guy I have sold 2 guitars to. He always offers me a fair price on stuff. Like, I know he's still going to make a profit on what I sell him, but he doesn't lowball me to a point where I'm insulted. Like, he'll make an initial offer and then he's usually willing to come up. But anyway, there are a bunch of flippers around here that are not like that. They're looking to lowball you and go sell something for 4 times what they paid for it. There's also members of the general public, which I was getting into earlier, that think that they should get back what they paid for something, right? And the reality of the situation is that's not going to happen until years after. If you have a piece that is legitimately like a one-off, like, I'll give an example. The new guitars that Vintage just came out with in the Silver Burst, where they made 100 Strat style, 100 T style, and 100 Les Paul style guitars, or V100s, or whatever they're called. those are going to be worth some money years from now because they legit only made 100 of them. They have a certificate of authenticity. I haven't seen any on Reverb listed right now, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time before people are going to be trying to sell them for a profit. So unless you have something like that, you are not going to get back what you paid for it. I repeat, you are not going to get back what you paid for it, nor should you expect to get back what you paid for it. So there are a lot of people in this area that do that are flippers that think, or members of the general public that aren't flippers that are doing that, but there are also a lot of flippers that think they can take advantage of people. And the majority of people I've bought gear from are musicians of some type. Like, for instance, there's a guy I've done a couple pedal trades with him now where he'll have something that he doesn't really like. I'll have something that I played for a while and I'm like, I'm not really into this, and we'll swap. Just go ahead and swap. Usually it's equal dollar amounts. Stuff like that I'm totally cool with. I know this guy, I know he's legit, etc., right? So all of these things are kind of snowballing and contributing to the used market. Not only people making runs on gear and trying to sell it for exorbitant prices, places being out of gear. Now they're actually catching up with the manufacturing and stuff, but if we shut down again, we're probably going to have another situation where we have a hard time finding new pieces that are coming out. Oh, let's get to Reverb too. So, disclaimer with this, I think Reverb is a great site. I think that I see the value in Reverb, and I'll tie Guitar Center into this later. And again, I love my local Guitar Center. The managers out of it are fantastic. Emma and I think her name's Ashlyn, or Alyssa, yeah. Emma and Alyssa and the team over there are fantastic, great people. They always treat me like a rock star when I go in there, even though they don't need to, and I'm obviously not a rock star, but they always treat me fantastic. I love that store. My beef with Guitar Center, and this is what Reverb is very good at, you take a piece of gear to Guitar Center that is very good, highly desirable. So, for instance, I tested this twice. I have that Fender Player Series Marauder that they only made for 1 year. I took that in there. Those recently have gone up on Reverb. I think I want to say I paid around $400 for it 6-ish years ago, something like that. Recently they've been going to $850 to $1,200. So according to the listings I've seen, and that's for the blue ones. The black ones I don't think I've seen listed. They made like a charcoal or a black or something like that, right? Cool guitars. They sound really good. They weren't super popular, but they sold out, right? I've seen those go for more than what I paid. In other words, I've seen the Toronados go for anywhere. The model I had, anywhere from $850 to $1,200 to $1,400 with no hard shell case, right? So I take both these guitars in with my case, right? And they're like, well, we can only give you 50% of what we're selling it for. And it's like, okay, what are you going to sell it for? Because you just offered me $200 for this guitar I know goes for $900 consistently on Reverb. And they're like, well, we can only sell this for $450. So either I think I have a piece of gear that's, that's the one I ended up getting double what I paid for it. So that's neither here nor there. The Marauder I took in, not expecting a whole lot. They only offered me $250 for it. So they offered me more for that than they did for the Toronado. And which is surprising because the Marauders don't have nearly the cult following for the Player Series ones that the Tornados do right now. But it's just the principle of the situation. Guitar Center, I feel, does not pay out worth a crap on used gear, especially for stuff that's good. Now, I can understand if you have people bringing in like Squire Strats or something that their kid's not playing anymore, like a Jackson Dickey or a Cruise by VMI or an early Cort guitar or what AXL or one of the many other beginner brands, Stag, or one of many other beginner brands of guitars. I can understand paying out low amounts for that stuff because it's beginner's gear. You're not going to be able to sell a Squire strap from the early 2000s for more than 90 to 120 bucks, right? So why pay out more than 50 to 60 on it? Whereas if you have, let's say you have a 70s Gibson Les Paul, like a 72 or something, there is no reason you should only be paying out 1,200 bucks for that if you're going to turn around and sell it for 3,500. Absolutely no reason whatsoever. And I take this from Music Around's philosophy when I worked there anyway. And what their thing was is they paid out 40 to 60% of what they could sell something for less any repairs. Unless you did it on consignment, then they would pay out. And again, I don't know how they operate now, so don't take this and go to Music Around and be like, well, Basement Guitar Superstar said you guys do this. Because this used to be a thing. And from what I remember, I think consignment was you could sell, we would list it for you and you got 80% of what we could sell it for. So top dollar, you would get 80%. So let's say you had a, math is hard, so forgive me if I do this wrong. Let's say you had a $4,000 Gibson Les Paul, something that the store could sell for $4,000. You would get 80% of that, $4,500-ish for that, right? And, or no, 3,500-ish, something like, see, math is hard. That's why I'm an insurance agent and do YouTube videos, right? And I'm not a mathematician. So stuff like that was really cool. And good gear, like Fender Tornados, which weren't as popular at the time, but like we had a Gibson Marauder, and because they made an original version called the Marauder 2 back in the 70s, we got one of those in. I think I paid 70% of what we could sell it for because the guy traded it in towards something else, right? And I got my butt chewed for it, but it sold 3 days later to another guy that did a trade for like an American P-Bass. Anyway, it's neither here nor there, but Music Around did a really, really good job of paying out good money for good gear, desirable stuff that they wanted to have in store that they knew would sell, right? Guitar Center, at least the ones I've dealt with, have not done a very good job of that. And I don't know if it's company policy, but they are cheapskates at paying out for good used gear, right? Stuff that's legitimately good, that's been taken care of, that's worth some money. They don't pay out worth a crap on. And you can get pissed at me all you want for saying that if you work at Guitar Center, but y'all are being cheapskates about used gear. So anyway, I love my local Guitar Center. This is just a harping on their process, not them as a company. So that has definitely contributed to this whole used thing as well. Because if I take a guitar now, I wasn't insulted by what they offered me for it, but it's like, you know, for that, I'm just going to deal with selling it on Facebook or reaching out to like Loudmouth, who is one of the flippers here that I like dealing with, that always offers me fair prices on my stuff. I'm just going to reach out to him because I know he'll give me what I'm looking to get out of it. So the fact that they don't pay out worth a crap on used gear is definitely contributing to this as well. And I think I remember, I could swear 10 years ago, Guitar Center was paying out great on used gear, right? Either way, they need to up their prices on what they're paying out for used stuff if it's a legitimately good piece of gear, right? So that's contributed to it. Flipping has contributed to it, especially flipping from people that have no business being flippers. Lack of employment, lack of time to do anything else. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and the internet is a great tool. I love the fact that we have so much access to free information now via the internet, but the access to information is also, it's a I'll put this like Garth Brooks talks about it. It's both a blessing and a curse, right? And here's why it's a curse. The reason it's a curse is any Joe Schmo can go on there and look, for instance, at Reverb, see somebody overinflating the crap out of a price on something that's really not worth that much, that on Guitar Center or Music Around. They'd be, so for instance, let me give you an example. There's a guy that had a Fender Frontman 212 combo amp. They're solid state amps that Fender makes that are really good, really solid. Excuse my pun. But they're good amps. They sound decent. They're not very expensive. I want to say new. They're $300 to $400, somewhere in that ballpark. Used, most of the listings for decent ones are, I've seen them from $150 to $275, right? So there's this kid that's 18 that's asking $200 for his. It's not willing to come down on price. And it's just because he has access to information like Reverb, right? And I'm not saying he shouldn't. And again, I'm not saying people shouldn't be able to make money doing this. It just, people that overinflate things because they don't have the knowledge that they need in order to be fair with things, or aren't musicians, or don't understand the concept of you're not going to get back what you paid for something unless something is, again, legitimately rare or desirable. There are too many people like that have access to too much information. Let me give you another example. Goodwill and Salvation Army have both started auctioning stuff off online, which is fine. However, part of the magic for me of going to Goodwill is going in there and discovering something that you didn't know they had. So for instance, I bought, and I flip some stuff too. I'm not going to say I don't do it because I certainly have. But for instance, I went into a local Goodwill 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I saw a copy of a board game called Wingspan. It's a highly popular game that I personally think is absolute trash. I hate it. I think it sucks. The artwork is pretty. It plays okay, but for what it is, it should not be as hyped as it is, right? So I go in there, I pay $3 for that. I turn it around, sell it for 25, boom. Great deal, right? Goodwill has started doing stuff where they will list any instruments online. And the thing that makes me mad about that is because so many people know about it now, it's impossible to get a good deal on like a legit good piece of gear. So for instance, anytime there's like a Gibson Les Paul or a Fender Strat on there, people just start bidding it up and it inflates the price. And it's like, I'm kind of mad jealous because I didn't know about that website before everybody knew about it. But at the same time, like, I'm also mad because I think Goodwill should be required to sell that stuff in their store too, and not online. And that's just me. That's just me being a, hey, you get off my lawn, old man. But stuff like that, you need to be able to, you need to sell it in store. And it's stuff like that really, really irritates me about the used market, is too many people know about that website now. So you can't get a good deal on anything, except I will say that some of the band instruments they have on there, I've seen great prices on like trumpets, cornets, trombones, flutes, like woodwinds, brass. I've seen fantastic prices on brass instruments on there. I've been tempted to buy some because they're stupid cheap is what they're asking. Like $300-$400 instruments they're selling for like $60. And I've been tempted to buy those, do a repad on them, and sell them for like 10% more than what I have into them to a local school that maybe can't afford to buy new instruments for their band members, or donate them to like a youth shelter or something if they have a kid that's interested in playing but their parents can't afford a rental. Something to that effect. And I've thrown around that idea, but if you want like a brass instrument, that's your place to go because nobody bids on those on there. Everybody's bidding up all the guitars. Now, the majority of stuff on there is just garbage. It's stuff that people owned that were beginner stuff that wasn't taken very good care of. For instance, there's a guitar on there. It was a Fender Strat, but I don't even know if it works. And they said it was tested, and it did. But if you look at it, like the stuff's all rusted out on it, and it's like, dude, if you own a guitar like this, you should be taking better care of it. But I get it. Stuff happens, right? But sites like that, way too many people know about them now. So it's impossible for me to go. I'm the type of guy where I don't feel like I'm getting a good deal on something, regardless of if I want to keep it or not, unless I pay, like, let's say you have a $1,200 Gibson Les Paul, right? If I don't pay less than $900 on that, I feel like I got an okay price. If I pay less than $900, I feel like I got a steal on it, right? Just to give you an example. Or like that Tornado. In retro, at the time, I was like, yeah, this is a good deal, you know. But now it's like, man, I committed highway robbery on that guitar because I got twice what I paid for it eventually. And it's stuff like that that, to me, and maybe it's just me being the cheap ass, you know, but I want to be able to acquire gear for myself or for the channel where I feel like I legit got a great deal on something. Now, my goal is not to rip somebody off by any means. I don't want to do that. I don't want you guys to think that. But I don't want to, in my policy that I do, just so you know, if you ever do a transaction with me, if I see a piece of gear I want, if it's something that I have to have, I'll offer close to what they go for used at Guitar Center. But if it's something I don't know if I want, but I'd like to try to see if I want to keep it, my policy is I usually offer about 20% more than what Guitar Center will pay for it used, or what most retail places will pay for it used. So anyway, guys, this video is getting lengthy. I've ranted for long enough, but those are my thoughts. Here's what I'm going to do about it. I have enough gear for the channel to last me until probably March. And I have a couple guitar shops I have agreements with now that'll let me go there and film when they get new stuff in. For instance, the Guitar Farm in New London, Iowa, my new friend Greg that runs that is fantastic. He said, anytime you want to come down and film, you're welcome to. And so I have that. I know that Shoemaker Guitars in Davenport, I can do that same thing with Thad. And I'll have a shop spotlight coming up on him pretty soon. I'll post that, let everybody on Instagram know about that as soon as I have it. And Guitar Center here, I'm still working on figuring out something with them that's not like officially affiliated with Guitar Center, but I can still go there and film new gear. We'll get that figured out. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to sit where I'm at for now and not acquire any new stuff unless I can just get a steal on something. And I think to eliminate a lot of frustration that people are having, you probably should do that too. Just sit and wait. Some of the key to acquiring new gear at what you feel is actually a good price is patience. And I hate that word. I am not a patient guy. I have zero patience because I don't like waiting on stuff, because I have missed out on certain opportunities in my life because I was told to be patient, and I heeded that advice and I missed out on opportunities because of it. So I'm not a patient guy. If I see something I want, I jump on it now because of having missed out on opportunities. But I think the key with this is you just need to sit back, wait till something you really want comes up. Either somebody doesn't know what they have, or they're desperate to part with it, like a dude getting a divorce that has to sell all his gear and able to afford his stuff, which is sad, and I hope that never happens. But anyway, guys, thank you as always for watching. If you agree or disagree with me, please post in the comments. Let me know about what frustrations you're having with the used gear market right now, because I'm certainly having a ton. So I know you guys are as well, and I know lots of people are too, because I've seen other videos on it. So yeah, thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you next time.